All right. Thank you so much, Ellen. I am so excited to be here with you guys tonight. Um, I would love to say that writing is something that I'm super passionate about, but honestly, I think a big part of what motivated me to start looking into this was that I don't love writing. And writing has been something for me that's always felt like tedious work. So, this method will hopefully help to change your mind about writing if you're someone like me who has felt that way, and also hopefully change the minds of your students because I know I have a lot of students who tend to be hesitant whenever it comes to the area of writing. So, let's get into it and talk about our night tonight. All right. So, a little bit about me. I've been teaching for 15 years. I come from an elementary education and special education background. And then, about 7 years ago, when I had my first of three sons, I decided that I was not going to teach full time, but instead I would stay at home with my kids. So, I had been a stay at home mom by day for the past 7 years, and I was teaching GED classes by night, primarily language arts, science, and social studies classes. And then just recently, about the end of the summer, I became an instructional coach. It's a new role for our program. We haven't had it before. So, my management team and I are working along with kind of defining the role and figuring out how I can support our instructors really well. So, I've been providing their professional development and also just being there for them to answer their questions about their curriculum or the standards or technology, really anything. So it's been a lot of fun. All right. So our goals for today's session will be to identify what the benefits of this digital journaling even are in the first place. We'll primarily be focusing on what it would look like in an ABE classroom. And I think that ESL instructors are going to benefit greatly from this as well, because it's definitely something that could be used in either program. We'll be looking at the content that we teach. So, whatever it is that you guys are currently teaching, I want you to be analyzing that and thinking about that tonight and how you could integrate what you're learning into your classroom, because we want this to be relevant to you and something that you can go home tonight and be able to implement right away in your class. We will look at different topics. We'll dive into some math topics tonight, as well as some language arts topics that would be good for you to use to motivate your students to write and to connect the content that you're teaching to their real relevant lives. We will also learn how to organize the journals. We'll be focusing on organizing them with Google Drive tonight. And if you don't have a Google account, don't panic. We'll talk about how to do that later tonight. But this is just another way for you to be able to get information from your students and to be able to assess them in real time. And the last thing we'll do tonight is we'll describe different ways to assess their writing. We'll talk about how to provide feedback to them that's meaningful and helpful and differentiated for what your students truly need. A little bit of background about Howard Community College, just so you know where I'm coming from whenever I present all of this to you tonight, is that our ABU program right now is mostly still fully virtual. We have one class that's on campus. And again, this is just talking about the ABE program. A lot of our regular credit classes are back on campus. The class that is on campus has access to computers in a lab. And those of us who are teaching off campus, our students either use their own laptops or they have the opportunity to request laptops or even Wi-Fi connections from our technology department. We have Canvas as a tool for the instructors to use to upload content and have student assessments on there and things like that. However, a lot of our instructors do not use Canvas for our program. The biggest obstacle for our program to access Canvas is that we have a very weird login system that the rest of the community college uses. And for some of our students, it can be very challenging to figure out their username and password. Some of our instructors use Schoology instead. Others just simply email documents to their students and interact in that way, or send out things through the Remind app. And some instructors organize their content on Google Drive. So currently we kind of have a hodgepodge of approaches that teachers are comfortable using with their students, but what we'll focus on tonight will be something you could do with Google Drive. Our students do not receive grades in our program. I know that I've talked to some of our ESL teachers and their students do. So that's a difference that we have on our side of the fence. And I would say about 90% of the staff that we currently have teaching our ABE students are technologically fluent teachers. They're able to do all the basics whenever it comes to computers. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get started on our actual presentation for tonight. And feel free to ask questions along the way. I know that Ellen will be helping me out. If you guys have a question, you can just let me know. So let's talk about what digital literacy means. I know this has sort of been a buzzword lately, so let's get down to a definition of it. It says digital literacy is the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information requiring both cognitive and technical skills. And we know that our students need to have a level of digital literacy or digital fluency if we want them to really be able to make it in the real world. So my first question that I have for all of you tonight is, how do you currently support digital literacy in your classroom? I'd love for you to go to the chat box and just put something in there. Are you supporting digital literacy in your classroom? Are you providing opportunities for your students to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information through the use of technology or not? I'd love to see that in the chat box. All right, we have somebody writing essays in Google Docs. Awesome. Okay, writing in the chat box. That's a great tool to use. I always encourage our instructors to do that. Got the WhatsApp, Google Classroom. All right, some people have not had the opportunity. Awesome. Schoology, Google Drive, emails. Okay, sounds like you guys are definitely using a lot of different things. Sending paragraphs and email, breakout rooms, great tool. Google Classroom, love it. And I am so jealous of those of you who have Google Classroom. I would love to have that. All right, Jamboard, Google Docs. Okay, awesome. It sounds like you guys are doing a great job with supporting digital literacy so far in your classes. Let's talk about why it even matters. And guys, there's a lot of text on this screen. I'm going to warn you first off, this will be the only screen I'm going to read fully tonight, but it's some really good research about why this matters in the first place. So just keep with me as I go through this. It tells us up here at the top that service sector jobs, and those are a lot of the jobs that would be available to our students, they comprise 32% of US workforce, and 73% of those jobs with those workers lack the skills to solve problems in a digital environment. That's what studies have shown. It says an increasing number of adults, especially those with annual household incomes below 30,000, are dependent on smartphones to access the internet. So many of our students might not have laptops or access to that. So why it's important for us to be using digital tools in our classroom is because when Wi-Fi is not accessible, these adults are forced to use the small screens on their phones and limited and expensive data plans to do complex tasks such as filling out job applications. It is reasonable to conclude that if ABE learners cannot achieve digital competence within ABE programs where they may have access to Wi-Fi, easier to use computers, and support from teachers and tutors, they might not have any chance to do so. This missed opportunity will impact their participation in work and daily life. So guys, we really want to be using technology as much as we can because we love our students and we want them to be successful in the real world, not just in our class. But some of them, our class might be the only time that they have access to these tools. Maybe they can't get to the library, or maybe they just don't have the gas to get there, or they don't have public transportation. Maybe all they have is their cell phone, but they're able to get to your program, or they're able to borrow a computer from your school if your school is able to provide that. And you are there to assist them and help them through it and get them to persist in what they need to learn. So this is an opportunity that we do not want to miss for our students. All right, so let's start to shift our mind. Now that we've talked a little bit about digital literacy and why it's important, let's start to shift to writing. And think about the first thing that comes to your mind whenever you think about writing. Like, I literally want you to go to the chat box, put in the first word, like word association style. What do you think about writing? Drafts. Oh, yes, so many drafts back in like high school. Stressful. I agree. Topic sentence. That's a good one. My first word was boring, like when I thought of this question. So I wouldn't be offended if anybody had that to say. Paragraphs, outline. Okay. You guys have some great words. I'm seeing a lot of the same things. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So now that our brains are thinking about writing, I want us to talk about how this fits in with technology and digital literacy. So you may recall, if you went to high school in America, that teachers loved to use journals. Like, I remember pretty much all of my teachers from middle school through high school would always have a prompt on the board, and we would have to answer the prompt in a journal. And as a young middle and high school student, I never really liked it very much. And I think, honestly, looking back on it, it was because it wasn't relevant to me. A lot of the prompts would be, about a fantasy, like what would you do if you were president of the United States, or what would your dream vacation be, things like that. So it got me thinking about my students and how we know that adult learners, when we look at adult learning theory, they need to have relevancy in their lives. So it got me thinking, like, what could I do to make sure that this is relevant for them? So everything that we'll talk about tonight as far as technology and prompts go are going to be prompts that will be relevant for our students. So we're going to look at how basic old school journaling, like what I went through in middle and high school and what some of you probably did, how we can integrate that with technology and come up with digital journaling. You might hear me also say blogging tonight, because sometimes I use those terms interchangeably just because they are something that we often hear about similarly. I got distracted by something in the chat box. Somebody mentioned time consuming to grade. And I want to talk about that later whenever we get to feedback, because I think one thing you'll really like about what I'm showing you tonight is that you can be grading as your students are working on it and thinking about what they're doing in real time. So we'll revisit that later on. Okay, I got one more question for you now. How often do you currently use writing in your classroom? It can be typed or handwritten. How often would you say you do it? Do you do it once a week, once a month? Never? Every day? Love it. Every class? Okay, you guys are so studious. I love that. Do we have any math instructors in here? If you are, could you just say like math in the chat box? I'm curious because I have a lot of math material for tonight too. Okay, a lot of you are frequent writers. Okay, thank you, Janet. Okay, thanks, Mark. I do have a couple of math people. Patricia, thank you so much. Awesome. Okay, so the general idea behind what I'm showing you tonight will look something like this. This was an idea that I started to do with my students when the pandemic started. We had just shifted to being in a virtual environment from teaching in person, and it was a little overwhelming at first, but I also felt for my students because it was a scary time. I mean, we've all been through it and we know how stressful that time was. And I thought, what is something that I could do as their teacher that would help me to feel, some presence with them, even though we weren't together, and just a way to get inside their minds a little bit to keep up with them and make sure they were doing okay mentally. Because, I'd started teaching those students when we were in the classroom, and then we suddenly had to shift to this awkward online environment together. So this was sort of something that I had just tried out on a whim. I made a folder and I gave every student a document, and they would have a prompt every class and they would type in there. And that's basically what we're going to do tonight, is talk about this and how we could do something like this if you have never done something like this before. It was a great way to get to know the students. They all enjoyed it. They learned a lot. And I've also taught some other instructors about this method. And I've heard from the other instructors that A, they feel like they know their students so much better. And B, they're so thankful to have something that they can immediately get results from their students about. Because sometimes when they're teaching virtual, if their students have their screens off and they're not participating in the chat box, the teachers can feel frustrated. Like, am I even, or my students even listening to me? So teachers have shared with me that using this in their classrooms has really helped them to feel connected with their students. So it will look something like this. I just wanted to kind of show that to you before I got into how this works and why it works and how it's important. This is an example of what a student document might look like. So there would be a question and a date, their response, which in my class, I always made it like 10 minutes. Some students could type an entire page. Some students could type a small amount. And then I would give them some type of feedback when they were finished. I gave you two different sort of ways to show it here. You could do a little rubric inside the document if you wanted to do it that way, or Google has this great little tool where you can actually mark in the document your corrections and changes, and the students can check it off when they have gone back through what you have told them and revised it themselves. I'll teach you both of these things later tonight if you don't already know how to do those. So I just wanted to give you a preview of where we're heading. Let's talk about the what, the when, and the why, and why this technique even matters. So research on technology-based writing has shown us a couple different things. It's shown us that the writing that the students need to be doing should always be relevant. And we know from adult learning theory that relevancy is huge to them being successful. It should be relevant to what skills they are currently developing in your classroom. And it should also be applying beyond the classroom. Like, for example, I was doing a model lesson for an instructor the other day, and those students had never heard of a cover letter before, probably because most of them have never had a job where they would have needed to write a cover letter. But it made me think about relevancy and how that is something that we could be integrating into our classes more, because someday we want our students to be able to write cover letters and be able to get that job that they want. So relevancy is going to help them to be successful. The writing task should also be relational. Research has shown us over time that the students should be having guidance from peers and their teachers. So one great thing about Google Docs, if you haven't used it before, is that it's very collaborative, and you can make it as collaborative as you want. You can have it just be something that you and your student work on together and provide feedback to them through, or you can bring in student interaction. You can have students work in Google Docs together, or you could have students do peer editing with one another where they would go through and look for something specific, really whatever target skill that you would want to give them to do. Sorry, let's here one more time. Okay. And research is showing us that it also should be reflective. It should have an effect of connecting the work done in the lecture room with experiences the students have had in the outside world. Again, this is highly related to adult learning theory, connecting what you're teaching them to what they're experiencing in the real world, bringing in news stories from the outside world, bringing in things that they have gone through in their lives and how those can apply to what they're learning in the classroom. The when. So when should you write? Some teachers like to do their writing at the beginning of class. Maybe they would have students make predictions about text. They might reflect on content from a class that they had before, or maybe they would just be able to relate something that they've done to what you're teaching. Some teachers like to do it in the middle of the class. I would say this is the least common time to do the writing, but some instructors do choose to do it at that time. A good way to use middle of class writing would be to be summarizing while you're teaching, defining vocabulary words in the terms of the students, or having them explain a process. Like if you're doing a math lesson, for example, that would be a great time to stop, pause, and have your students just jot down or type what it is that they've been learning in class. Or you might choose to do it at the end of class. This is a great way to assess student understanding of whatever it was that you were teaching that night, having the students reflect on a process or a series of events. Maybe you were teaching a science class and you went through the scientific method that night. So the end of class would be a great time to have your students do a digital journal about that and how that process works. Sequencing, defining, or explaining. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just some examples of when you might want to use it and how you might want to use it in your class. So let's talk about why this benefits us, because you're all sitting here right now, I guarantee it, thinking, okay, what am I going to get out of this? We as teachers, we want things that are instant and easy. We don't want to have to do a million things because we are already overwhelmed by a million things. So there are so many benefits for this to make your lives easier. The first thing is you can check a Google Doc anytime, anywhere. When my students are typing, I literally pull up every student's document. So I would have like all of their names lined up at the top of my internet browser, and I could easily click in at any point while they're working and see if they're typing, because, you know, they might have just decided to go to the bathroom and not say anything. I can see what they're typing. So I can instantly see if they're typing something that's way off base. I will know right away. It's kind of like being able to like look over their shoulder all the time in a classroom without actually physically doing that. And I always let the students know, you know what, you might see me pop into your document while you're typing. I'm just there to support you, see how things are going, give you some tips if you might need to pause and rethink something, or just encourage you along the way. So students know that that's something that might happen. It's not surprising to them. And they also know that I keep those documents open during class. So it really does hold them accountable. You can just click whatever you want to see. If you have a student who you see is going way off track, you could send them a message in the chat box if you're teaching virtually. If you're in the computer lab or something like that, obviously you can just go up to them and help them. Or you could type right in their Google Docs. So sometimes my students, especially those who come from a different language other than English, a lot of times they might have words in the wrong order in their sentences, or they might have used the incorrect word. So it's really easy in the Google Doc while they're actually typing to go in there and be like, hey, Anna Maria, I noticed this while you were typing. Let me try to help you come up with the right order for this. Or let's look at this word and see if we think something else might sound better. You can type that right in there while your student is working and have that interaction one-on-one with them. That's definitely the biggest advantage, I think. It's instant assessment and feedback. Again, you get it right away. You can give them feedback right away. You could even be working on providing that feedback while they're typing to them. As I just kind of discussed with you guys, you can put those little comments over to the side and they can check them off after they've fixed whatever it was that you mentioned that needs to be fixed. It improves student-teacher and student-student relationships, depending on how you use this tool. You'll get to know your students on a deeper level whenever they're writing on a regular basis, especially if you're connecting what you're learning in class to their real lives. You can make it all about them, and you can really customize their learning plan this way. You're giving them frequent feedback, and you can also provide opportunities for other students to give them feedback. I'll show you two different ways tonight when we get into like the methods portion of this presentation. I'll show you how you can decide to keep your documents private so that only you and the student can see them, but I'll also show you a way that you can make the whole folder public for your class in case you want to have lots of student interaction. And if that's the case, I always let students know, hey, everybody can see what you're typing. Don't put anything in here that you don't want someone else to read. And I've never had an issue with that when I've chosen to do it that way. And another benefit, as we talked about a couple of times, it integrates real world connections to learning and deepens understanding of content. Some of the math prompts in particular that I'll show you guys in a little bit, they are really great for helping students to analyze mistakes in other people's problems or think beyond the basic problem to create their own problem. There's just some really great opportunities in there for making them have some higher order thinking throughout the mathematical process. Students also really benefit from this. One of the best things that I've seen with our students is it really helps them develop growth mindset over time. you might have a student who comes in who never types. They only use their cell phone. And this might be the first time they've ever really typed in their lives. And if they could only type one sentence in 10 minutes the first time, then the next time they type, tell them to type two. Or maybe the first time they typed, they didn't have any capital I's. They had all of their letter I's, lowercase i's. You can talk to them about that. You could post a video in their document for them and give them some feedback about that. And then next time say, hey, the next time you type, I want you to capitalize the letter I whenever you're referring to yourself. So that is always getting them to grow. It's always showing them that they can do something a little bit better each time to constantly be improving themselves. It's also a really great opportunity for collaboration, as we discussed. Something cool with Google Docs that I'll show you in a little bit is there is a tools button on there, and you can teach your students how to check their spelling errors. You can teach them how to look up words in the dictionary or a thesaurus if they need to use a tool such as that. There's also some editing tools in there that you'll see, from like using Word and stuff. You get the little squiggly lines under words whenever you have something that's not quite grammatically correct or spelled correctly. It's a great time to teach your students how to use those tools, because someday when they're in the workforce, if they're not already, they're going to need to know how to do all of that stuff, because you all know as well as I do that we live in a digital world and it's not going backwards anytime soon. Our students have to be competent at writing emails. They need to come across as people who know how to type. And we want to make sure that they are people who know how to type and how to use those tools. It's also a holistic approach to help them reduce anxiety. I know, especially in the area of math, our students at HCC have expressed many times that they're just so afraid of the GED math test. And there's some prompts in here that are really good for helping them to think about how they feel about the math and how they can improve on those feelings, and things that they can walk through to help to just sort of make them more aware of how they're feeling so that they can come up with some action steps to improve those situations. Also, some of the prompts that I'll show you for the language arts area, they hit on some things that really will connect with your students and might bring up something that just helps them to feel calm amidst this crazy time. This time has been really hard for everybody, and it's a great opportunity for our adult learners to sort of spill their guts a little bit with you and have you be a person in their life who respects their feelings and provides them feedback, and doesn't just give them feedback academically, but gives them feedback saying things like, I'm really sorry that you're going through that, or I'm here for you if you need any help with that. Just being there for them and letting them know that you care for them is something that you can do with this tool. And as we talked about, job skills, we want them to be competent. So let's look at some math topics. I love a lot of these math topics. The first couple of links, and I know you're probably like, oh, Kalie, you have a million links on here. I do, but I also have a Wakelet for you guys that I will give you at the end of this session, and then you'll have all the links too. So you don't need to worry about like saving any of these or writing them down. I'll give you that at the end of this session, so you'll have it. The first three prompts here, these are all more like, I would say holistically focused sort of prompts. They're going to dig into more how your students are feeling about math. So let me just click on one of these links and show to you what I'm talking about. If you're in GED world like me, you know who Steve Schmidt is. Like, he has so many great GED resources. But I found this list of questions the one day, and I thought they were really interesting. Having students write about their best experience with math, describing how it feels if you have to show your work on the board, explaining how they feel when they begin a math learning experience. So these are much more feelings-based types of questions. This was an interesting idea about having students writing math stories. And this person has a very lengthy document that I won't go through all of tonight, but it's very interesting. It has a story here, a math story in the country by Oscar Lopez. This person talks about their math story, and some of the times that were important to them growing up, and containers that they had to fill up with water and things like that. So they talk about how numbers have played a part in their life and times that they have needed to use math and measuring materials and things like that, and how they've done those depending on where they've lived. I thought that this was really interesting. Especially some of you ESL teachers, you might want to look at this later. I think it would be lovely to see how some of your students and some of the ABE students have used math throughout their lives in different parts of the world. I think this could be a really interesting thing to do with students. So there's some math stories here. This comes from GED, but again, it's math attitudes and dispositions. A lot of these are similar to what Steve Schmidt had posted, but these are things that you could use, topics that you could use to help your students to reduce that math anxiety that is very real with so many of them. I really like this one. I want to become better at math so that I blank. Like, we all want to be better at something when it comes to math. So that might be a fun one to use. And this link here is my absolute favorite. So those of you who are like thinking right now, okay, Kalie, these are really great. Like, these are fun and fluffy feelings kind of thing. Show me the real stuff. This is for you. These are the content-based prompts. And I love these. These are some really high order thinking type of math prompts. You sort of have to scroll down here a little bit to get to them, but there are 17 prompts here. What do you know to be true about this situation? How do you know? Tell me everything you know about whatever the math topic is. Explaining in words how to solve a problem. We know this is really big right now in schools. If you have children, you know that they have to do this all the time. Explain 2 ways to solve a problem. What would be the most efficient way to solve a problem? And let me go down to, yeah, I liked these. How are these graphs or solutions similar or different? There's a couple in here about analyzing mistakes that students have made. Like, what did the student do well? What mistakes did they make? So this list is awesome. But you could definitely integrate writing into math class. And next semester at HCC, we're actually going to be having our instructors try this out. This will be a trial thing. We're going to see how it goes, but I would love for our math teachers to begin to integrate a little bit more of writing into their classes. So I'll keep you posted on how that goes. But these are some great places to start with that. And I have a bunch of language arts topics for you as well. Let me start with these ones down here. This is a very long list that I won't click on right now, but it's 365 days of writing. And it pretty much has a topic for every single day. So if you're somebody who you don't necessarily want to have it tied to your content all the time, maybe sometimes you just want something fun for students to write about, this link would be fantastic for you to use. This activity, Future Me, is really cool. And some of you may have heard of this. Has anybody ever heard of this? I'd love to see in the chat box if you have ever used it. Oh, okay. Ramona said she would have students write their own word problems. I love that idea. Some people said warm up, exit ticket, very good thinking. So this is cool. I stumbled upon this the other day. Yes, okay. Ellen knows what I'm talking about. Future Me, you can go to this website, and this is not in the Google Doc, but you could do this in the Google Doc if you wanted to have all of your classroom journals together in one place. But you could also just have students do this like the first week of class when you're getting to know them and they want to set some goals for themselves. It's a website where you go, you type a letter to your future self, you decide when you want it to be delivered. So you can pick a date or like a certain amount of years. You can decide if you want it public or private, and you can actually like email it to yourself and it will show up years from now. I remember doing stuff like this when I was younger, but it was with like a real handwritten letter. So this is very cool and a great way to have your students set some goals for themselves. You could always have them type it here on the site so that it emails to them and then paste it into their document if you wanted to make sure that you read it as well. I'm sure you have lots of creative ways to figure out how you could use that in your class. Yeah, thank you, Monica. I agree. I think it's a really awesome tool. So definitely make sure you get this link, futureme.org. And This is a list of prompts that I came up with myself, pulling from various resources. Something that was really important to me as a GED instructor was to make sure that whatever I was teaching with my students, A, was standards aligned, but B, was related to what we talked about in class. I wanted it to always be relevant to them. So I went through the Common Core or the College of Career Readiness Standards. And I put over here the reading focus, and I put some prompts that would probably align really well with those. And I highlighted a couple that I thought would be good to read to you guys. So if you were teaching logical inferences, for example, a topic that you might want to give your students that night would be to show a picture to your students and have them write a story that answers a question about the picture, like how is the person feeling, or describe a day in the life of the person shown. This would require them to make a whole lot of inferences and also be able to back up why they are inferring that about the person. This could really spring some great classroom conversation. And I'll pick one more just for time's sake so that I can dive into showing you how to do this. Let me go to this one here. If you were teaching point of view or purpose, you could have students write about really anything. Like you could pick a zombie, a vacuum, I don't care, whatever it is that you want them to write about. But have them write about it in 3 different ways. So you could have them write it in a persuasive way, like why would you need a vacuum cleaner? Or why everyone should have a vacuum cleaner. An entertaining way, maybe they would choose to write a story about a vacuum cleaner falling in love, and then have them write an informative essay about a vacuum cleaner, telling information about the origin of it. So you can take one object and have them write about it for 3 different types of purposes. So there's a lot of different ideas in here. There's some here that are related to COVID, like looking at actual data and describing observations that are made based on the data. I'm going to say it both ways to make all of you happy. All right, so this list is one that I came up with. I hope that you can find some things on there that you will be able to use in your class. Now let's get into the how. So this is how we're going to do it. How we would provide the feedback to our students is kind of a systematic way. So I've been working on this now for about 4, oh my goodness, how many semesters have I taught since COVID started? 1, 2, 3, I think 4. The first couple student blogs that they write or digital journals, I don't really give them much feedback. I really only comment on what they wrote to encourage them. Like I usually have them start by writing something very simple every semester. And I provide feedback about, hey, like, thanks for sharing that with me. I really like to go for walks too. Like I would say something relational to them about what they wrote. And the purpose of those first couple of digital journals that your students write is not to give them a bunch of feedback about their grammar. It's to build that relationship with them. So you'll want to give them relationship focused feedback. You might give them a couple tiny little errors. Like if you notice that they're never using capital letters at the beginning of the sentence, that would be something that you would want to take care of right away. And that could also just be something that you would remind your whole class about. Like, hey, I noticed 3 of you are not capitalizing your letter I's whenever you're talking about yourself. Let's try to do that the next time. So it could also just be a class reminder. And you want to note the strengths of your students. You want to point out to them what they are doing really well. Feedback first. Yes, for sure. Relationships first. You want to make sure that you are building up their strengths so that they know what they're good at before you start giving them a bunch of suggestions. So those first couple of digital journals will be an awesome time to point out if they're able to write complete sentences or commenting, hey, wow, you were able to type 6 sentences in that 10 minutes time, or, just something that you thought that they did really well. That's where you want to point it out. Throughout the semester, you would focus on them making progress. They're not going to be perfect, but you want them to be getting a little bit better every time. So your feedback can be very specific about what goals that you have for them and what you think they could be doing the next time. You can give them a rubric if you choose, and I'll show you kind of that in a few minutes. You definitely want to focus on the most frequent errors. You're not going to pick apart everything that they do wrong for every digital journal. I like to try to think about like 2 things that I noticed. So I'll read their entire digital journal and I'll think in my head, okay, what really stood out to me as being a glaring error, that if they were taking their GED test, the GED testers or the scorers would be thinking, oh my goodness, what was this student doing? Granted, there's not really anybody reading their digital journals, but I try to think in the mind of somebody else assessing them and what would stick out the most and focus on those big things, because some of the smaller things like maybe if they're never using commas, like I guess that would be a big deal. I try to focus on like commas with conjunctions and things like that, or commas in a series, but I don't get into all the little tiny details about commas. I just look for things that are like glaring errors that other people would notice. A lot of the time students need help with adding in transitional words and phrases. So that's something easy that you can look for and be able to provide feedback about. But the important thing is you want them to be student manageable errors. We have to think like our students, not like teachers when we're giving them feedback. Because if you have ever seen the GED extended response rubric, you know what I'm talking about. It's very not student friendly. And I'll show you in a little bit a way that I've been able to provide feedback to students that has been much more friendly for them so that they can actually understand what they have to do in the first place. And okay, I have a question for you guys before we move on to the next thing. Quick yes or no. Do you have a Google account? Go to the chat box, put it in. Just before I get into this next part, this will be really helpful for me to know. And it's okay if you don't. Okay, so most of you are saying yes. I think I've seen just a couple no's. So I have resources for all of you tonight. If you don't have a Google account, I'm hoping by the end of this session that that's something that you can do. If you do have a Google account, that's great. So there's really two methods that you can use to set up these journals. The easiest way is to do the Google Docs, sort of like the preview picture that I showed you all earlier, and I will go through how to do this method tonight. There's a more advanced way that you can make digital journals with Google Slides, and there's a lot of fun templates that you can use, but I will not be going over this evening. I do have the link for this in the Wakelet that I'll give you at the end of the session, but it's a little bit more advanced, but you can do some really cool things with it. This just kind of had some like pictures of how it might look a little bit different. Also, you can even add in, you can get really fancy and put like table of contents and things like that into yours, but you don't have to get fancy. The way I'll show you tonight is not fancy. I have a video here for those of you who have Google Classroom. So if you're somebody who has that, there's an easier way to do it with Google Classroom. But I'm going to show you tonight like what you would do if you didn't have that. So let me go into this folder. This is my example folder for the evening. And in my folder, I'll just kind of show you what a document would look like. I always model for the students before I have them do any journaling. So, for example, here are some of the first prompts that I would give students, like, how did this week go? How were the first 2 weeks of class? And I would write for them so they can get to know me better, feel like I'm a real regular human being because I talk in here about how I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed and how things are crazy and, you know, what my kids did that day. We did a compare and contrast of life now versus January 2020, things like that that just help to make us feel a little bit more connected. But I always model for them first. And then the students all have their documents that they type in. Now, if you look at this folder later, which you'll be able to since you'll have access to my presentation, you will see that I've given students feedback in different ways. Not all of these documents are in here are from the same semester, and I have sort of refined how I've done things over time. But you can see, like, for example, if I click on this student's blog or digital journal, that what I wrote back to her was in red. So the first time I ever did this, I really just used color to respond to my students. And we would just do the date, topic, have them type, have me provide feedback. This is the easiest way to do it. And you can see over time, maybe I would start to use the comments over here and they can look through these comments. They can check off once they have resolved whatever it was that I was suggesting to them. you can see I had a little list here. Once we started getting more into some of the grammar and language and things like that, some more specific things to look for. And you can kind of see it progress over time to the point where we get to the extended response essays. So I provided this student with like a little way to get them started on what they needed to write. They wrote their extended response essay, and you see a lot of color in here. This is a method that would work for most students unless you have someone who's colorblind or something like that. But I have a little color-coded rubric that I often use with my classes, and they would go through and highlight their thesis statement in pink, and they know what that is through our class lessons. They would go and look for their textual evidence and highlight that in orange, their explanations of evidence in yellow, the opposing viewpoint in blue, transitional words or phrases in purple, and the conclusion in green, kind of to make sure they have all the parts of the extended response essay. And if you're not somebody who teaches language arts GED, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but it's a very complex essay that students are expected to be able to do at the end of the language arts GED test. So this is what we work up toward, and this is what the writing really builds to at the end. And then students go through and they assess themselves. This was actually a student assessed rubric here. So they went through, they asked themselves these questions, and then I give them feedback at the end. So this is kind of just a sort of overview of what a student blog might look like. I want to show you guys really quickly how you would do this. So let's say you wanted to do this with your class and you don't know where to start. If you have a Google account, you have this thing called Google Drive. And if I go to my Drive, like I have lots of folders in here and they're all organized and I have documents in there. So I'm going to go to my VTI example class. But if you didn't have a class or a Google Drive, you could make a folder by going to new folder, and then you can title it whatever you want. So maybe you would call it Digital Journals Winter 2022. Can you believe it's almost 2022 already? Oh my. And it makes a folder for you. Ta-da, there we go. But I already made one for you tonight to explore. So this is my example class. And in here, let's say I wanted to add a student document. I can do this two different ways. So I'll show you the initial way to make a document for your class. So I would just go to new, Google Docs, create and shared folder. Yes, I want to do that. And then I like to just name it the student's name. I just go by first names typically. So we'll just say this is Joe. And then Joe can now type in his blog. And while he's typing, whatever he would be typing would be showing up here. And as his instructor, I could click on Joe's link and see exactly what he is typing. And at that point, I could actually stop him and give him feedback if he needed some feedback. I've shown instructors how to do this. And what we do together is they'll make the file and I'll have them type something. And then I'll go in and type something too, just so they can see how that works, so that they feel competent and comfortable being able to do that with their students. Now, you don't just have one student in your class. So there's a couple things you need to know how to do. The first thing is to share this with your students. You would go up to the share button, and down here under our community college, because I'm using our community college's Drive, I have to click on this and make sure it's not restricted just to Howard Community College, because oftentimes our students don't log in with their accounts. And I change it to anyone with the link. And then I can copy Joe's link and share it with him. If you need help in figuring out how to do that for your school, I would be happy to work with any of you guys. I'll give you my email at the end of this session so that you can do that. I really wanted you to be able to make these tonight, but I don't know if we'll have time to do that. The nice thing about this is then instead of having to keep going in and doing that over and over and over again, you can just go to File, make a copy, and then you can name this your next student's folder or next student's document. So maybe I want this to be Ellen's document. Here's the important thing. I'm going to click on share it with the same people. Otherwise, I have to go back into my sharing settings and change the restriction level again. But if I click share it with the same people, then whenever I go into this document, If I go up here to share, my computer is not happy with all these windows I'm opening up. If I go up here to share, oh, and I actually forgot to change it to edit. So I'll do that too now. You can see anyone on the internet can view, and that's what we would want to show up rather than it being restricted. But I did forget to do something. I forgot to change it to editor. So this is really important. You would want to make sure that yours is set to editor. Otherwise, your student would not be able to edit their document. So I'm going to do that for Joe and Ellen. And then I'll do this one more time to show you guys how that will carry over if I make a copy again. And you could copy Ellen's or Joe's. Either one would show up. And I'm going to just put in Missy, share with the same people. And then when I go up to my sharing settings, I will be able to see that it is shared with anyone with the link and that Missy should be able to be an editor for this document. If everything goes right. Yes, here we go. Anyone with the internet can edit. Okay, so when you go back to your folder, you can see that those students have now populated into this folder. They're in here. And you could do this a couple different ways to share this with your class. You might decide, oh yeah, somebody also put that in the chat box. Thank you. I just missed that the first time around. You can decide if you want to share this whole folder with your class so that everyone can see everyone else's documents. That's where you really want to make sure your students understand that it is not private and that anybody can see their work. If you would like to do that, then you can actually just share this whole folder with your class by going to the folder name and clicking on share. Again, you would have to share, change the restriction settings to make sure that it's shareable for your program. But if you wanted to make this more private, you could simply email or text or communicate through the Remind app, however it is that you contact your students. You could just share their personal document with them by going up to the share button in their document, copying that link for them and sending it to them the way that you would send it to your students. That way they can access it, they can type in it, you can see what they're typing. So again, I would just open all these up. I like to have them open and you can see what the students are doing. Our classes are typically pretty small at HCC, so it's pretty manageable for me to be able to do. If you had a larger class, that might be more difficult, but you could choose to maybe spot check and open up a couple documents each night so that you can see what your students are working on while they are typing. But that's pretty much the gist of it. If you wanted to learn how to do, I'll show you this really quickly. Let's say you wanted to comment to a student when you were providing feedback to them about something. So maybe I wanted to comment to my student about these words right here. Okay, I'm just going to highlight something. You could just think about whatever it is that you want to comment about, go over to this little plus sign, and then you can add a comment here, whatever it is you want to say, click on comment, and it will add it over here for the student, but it will also highlight it for them. They can read what you wrote. They can decide if they want to reply to you, they can type it right here and reply to you. So they might say, thanks for the feedback. And then they can just click on the little check mark once they have fixed whatever the error was. If they had a word in here that was like misspelled or something like that, you can teach your students how to evaluate whether or not this is something that they wanted to fix. So this comes up with the little squiggly red things underneath. You can teach them to click on it, decide if this is the word that they want to change it to, have them reread to see if it makes sense. If so, then they can click on and change it to that word. But this is an important skill to teach them because we want to make sure they don't just go through and click all the things that come under red because sometimes it's not correct. If it's not exactly, I mean, you guys know from typing things, sometimes they're not exactly what you wanted it to say. So that's an important skill for them to be able to do. So I'm not going to have enough time for you guys to do this on your own, but what I want you to think about are any questions that you might have, or in the chat box, I'd love you to put any questions that you have, or if there is something that you think would be a challenge for you to use or an obstacle that might interfere with you being able to do this with your program. So take a moment Go ahead and type in any questions or obstacles that you think might come up. Copy down my email address if you have a question that you'd like to ask. And otherwise, I'm going to put this QR code here. This is for the Wakelet for tonight's session. And you can scan that QR code, or I will get this link for you and put it in the chat box so that you guys all have access to it. So let me go and post that for you. Okay, yes, privacy concerns for sure. It's up to you guys how you want to do it. Yeah, so somebody mentioned students, if they had a cell phone, that would be hard. This would be hard. Our program is very fortunate that we have the ability for students to contact our technology department and get laptops borrowed from HCC. If you don't have that, this would be very difficult for them to do on a phone. Hopefully you have some way at your school that you're able to get them to a computer or a laptop. But if not, this would definitely be a tool that would be difficult. There is a way to edit it on a cell phone, but it's much more challenging. But I do have a graphic that I can put in the Wakelet later that shows the difference between editing a Google Doc in your cell phone versus editing the Google Doc in a computer. Because on the cell phone, they have to like take a little extra step and click on like a little, I think it's a little pencil to edit. Whereas if they're editing on the computer, they can just type in there, it saves automatically. On the phone, it does not save automatically. So that's something really important to point out some. Oh, a couple of people are asking me about Wakelet. So what Wakelet is it's a collection of all the resources from tonight. So if you click on the link for the Wakelet and go there, let me show you this real quickly if you're someone who's not familiar with it. Let me post that. So if you go to the Wakelet, the presentation from tonight is at the top of this. And then you can see some techie how-to guides. There are some videos here in case there's something that you still have a question about. And then I have a whole bunch of writing prompts. So these are the links from the presentation tonight. All of the writing prompts are in here. You can also simply access all of these things by going into my presentation, which is up here at the very top. And all of those links are in there too. So you can access it whichever way is the most convenient for you. You can use the link or the QR code that was posted. A client-side error has occurred. Is that for the Wakelet or for the survey?
The Wakelet's working for me, so.
Okay, oh, yeah, I'll share the Wakelet code one more time. Let me pull that up for you guys. Nice and big. Okay. Yeah, the link worked over here too. If the QR code doesn't work, the link might be the way to go. All right, are there any other questions?
Well, Kalie, thank you so much. What a creative use of merging writing, an essential skill that our students need, and technology, another essential skill that our students need. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us tonight.
Thank you.